a narrow way through.
After the massive success of Dune 2021 and an overall positive response from the fans and critics, the expectations were high for Dune Part Two. The recently released sequel has maintained the legacy of the franchise, as this big-budget effort delivers with a thematically dense, large-scale storytelling, continuing the journey of Paul Atreides as he looks to avenge the wrongs done to his family. With an overwhelming box office, it's quite likely we'll get to see a continuation of the franchise, and Dune 3 seems very much in the cards. In this video, we'll explore the possibilities for the storyline in the third movie of the franchise, and look into how the socio-political events of the fantasy world might unfold. Before we get into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Consider what you're about to do, Paul Atreides.
Silence!
How does Dune Part 2's ending keep things on a cliffhanger? Denis Villeneuve's adaptation of Frank Herbert's iconic seminal sci-fi novel Dune saw him make his own swift changes while also staying true to the original story arc. Villeneuve made sure that Dune Part 2 ended on a similar note as Part 1, on a cliffhanger with a lot still at stake for the main characters. The movie follows Paul Atreides and his mother, Lady Jessica, as they continue their journey of seeking revenge against those who destroyed their family. Paul finds love in Chani, and he unites the Fremen and joins their revolution against the Harkonnen oppressors. Eventually, life comes full circle for Paul, but not quite. He does get his revenge on the Harkonnens for the killing of his father, but his journey is yet to be concluded. The movie ends with him taking over as the Emperor, and he even marries Princess Irulan for the greater cause despite his love for Chani. Throughout the movie, Paul can be seen tormented by disturbing visions of the future, and finally, after drinking the water of life, he gains certain superpowers that set him on course to becoming the Messiah according to Fremen prophecy. He can now see the future, and he has a renewed consciousness that guides him, but it isn't exactly your cliche happy ending. He's not exactly at peace, and Chani has enough reasons to hold a grudge against him for choosing the princess over her. She refuses to join Paul in his holy war, and there are enough hints that the great houses refuse to accept his leadership. It seems to be the beginning of Muad'Dib's holy war, and Paul's earlier apocalyptic vision seems to be inevitable.
This is a form of power that our world has not yet seen. The ultimate power.
Does Dune Part 2 actually set up Dune Messiah for the sequel? Denis Villeneuve has not been secretive about his fascination with Dune Messiah, a novel written by Frank Herbert after the massive success of the original. While speaking to Vanity Fair, Villeneuve revealed that the screenplay for Dune 3 is already in progress, but he also made it very clear that he wouldn't try to hurry his way through the process. In his own words, "I want to make sure that if we go back there a third time, it'll be worth it, and that it would be something even better than Part 2. The director's eagerness to work on Dune Messiah for the next part of the franchise is also hinted at by a subtle change that he introduced in Dune Part 2 from the source material. While in the books, Chani is pretty much a believer in Paul, the movie introduced some friction between the two on the topic of Paul's quest for revenge. She can also be seen openly challenging Paul Atreides about his selfish intentions as he assumes command of the Fremen for his personal mission. Chani's lack of blind faith in Paul and her strong individual character might set up the course for Dune Part 3, which would be Villeneuve's own take on Dune Messiah.
The princess must prepare herself for what is to come.
You've been preparing me my whole life.
What happens in Dune Messiah, and what can we expect in Dune 3? Frank Herbert enjoyed a lot of recognition and notoriety following the release of the original Dune novel. He even won the Hugo Award and Nebula Award for Best Novel. However, he wasn't too pleased with how his story had been perceived. The author's intention was to make his readers wary of charismatic leaders and prophecy-fueled messiahs. Throughout his career, he had explicitly warned readers against the idea of heroes and blind faith in these saviors, but many of them actually admired Paul as the cliched hero in the story. This encouraged Herbert to pen down an eye-opener for the fans as he drafted the 1969 sequel, Dune Messiah. The story is set roughly 12 years following the events of the original Dune, and here, Paul, now known as Muad'Dib, is ruling as the Emperor. The Fremen blindly worship him, but his reign is far from trouble-free as some powerful factions, such as the Bene Gesserit, are now conspiring against him. Meanwhile, the religious cult surrounding Paul has embarked on a violent jihad that has taken the lives of around 61 billion people across the universe. The widespread violence and massacre has left Paul grief-stricken, and he regrets many of his past actions. He's stuck in a dilemma, where he would be perceived as weak if he called off the war, and he would be hailed as a martyr if he died in the process. Even Princess Irulan's political marriage with Paul doesn't work as planned, and she allies with the Bene Gesserit, who want to further the Atreides line through her child. Paul, however, doesn't want to have a child with Princess Irulan, and his best efforts in fathering a child with Chani fail because Irulan is secretly slipping her contraceptives. Paul's aware of this entire conspiracy, but he doesn't do anything about it because he had a vision where he saw Chani die immediately after having his child. But fate can't be pushed back for long, and Chani manages to get pregnant, and she dies after giving birth to twins, a boy and a girl. After a lot of political turmoil and multiple attacks on Paul, he loses his prophetic visions, and according to the Fremen tradition, he goes into exile in the desert. It is assumed by everyone that a blind Paul would be inevitably dead in his solo journey, and it marks an uncharacteristic end to the heroic savior. Meanwhile, the Fremen now support his children, and his sister, Aaliyah Atreides, acts as a regent as the twin children, Leto and Ganima, are cared after as future rulers. In many ways, Dune Messiah crashes the dreams that were created in Dune. The myth of a happy ending remains far from reach, and it gives the realistic outcome, where the solution to one problem often leads to another. You can expect the story in Dune 3 to move along these lines, and of course, Villeneuve is bound to introduce a few subtle changes to keep things in line with his version of the adaptations. However, you can be sure of the fact that Paul Atreides' character will take a darker and more complicated turn in Dune 3, and you may not see the altruistic, all-perfect leader that you wish to see. Will Aaliyah Atreides play a key role in Dune 3? Aaliyah Atreides has been one of the most mysterious characters in Dune Part 2, and one of the major changes introduced by the director has been with the timeline of the narrative. In the movie, Aaliyah Atreides is Lady Jessica's unborn child, as well as Paul's sister, and she's gained consciousness after Lady Jessica consumed the water of life during her pregnancy. Aaliyah is shown to have the memories and knowledge of her ancestors, and she communicates with her mother from the womb, giving her directions about their next step. She even communicates with her brother Paul through his visions, and even though her role in the movie is limited, it is no less impactful than some of the main characters that we see. Also, it's important to note that the casting of someone of the stature of Anya Taylor-Joy for this brief role is pretty significant. Surely the makers didn't bring her in for one small scene and a few voiceover moments, and they have bigger plans for the character in the future. Villeneuve ensured that she was cast for the role because he hopes for her return for Dune 3, which would be his take on Dune Messiah. If you've read the book, you already know that Aaliyah Atreides has a major role to play in the events of the novel, and we expect nothing less from the character in Dune 3. She'll be responsible for avenging the wrongs done to her brother, but more importantly, she'll be the guiding force in raising Paul and Chani's twins, unless the director introduces some major changes to the story arc. Whatever be the case, the fans of the franchise should be prepared to see a lot more of Anya Taylor-Joy in the upcoming movie, and quite possibly as one of the major characters next time around.
I will love you as long as I breathe.
You will never lose me as long as you stay who you are.
When can we expect Dune Part 3? Probable release date and possibilities explored. The recently released Dune Part 2 has raked up impressive collections, and the craze behind the franchise keeps growing after the opening weekend. Meanwhile, we've already spoken about how director Denis Villeneuve is optimistic about a third movie, and how he's already working on the screenplay. The Legendary Entertainment CEO shed some light on the possibility of the next Dune movie, and he seemed pretty optimistic about the future of the franchise. However, he also mentioned that Dune 3 would be given the go-ahead only after Villeneuve gets the script right and all creative stakeholders are aligned. You could argue that Dune Part 2 has more of a conclusion than the first Dune movie, but there are still a few loose ends that the fans would want to pursue. The director has fueled the excitement among the fans by adding that he'd like to expand the lore for Dune 3. With the commercial success of Dune Part 2, we have to say that there's a lot of hope for a continuation, and Dune 3 seems very much in the cards. That being said, you have to remember that the second Dune movie took almost 3 years to be ready, and a grander event might require even more time. We're expecting Dune 3 to hit theaters sometime around 2027-2028, and you can be sure that all the major characters, such as Timothée Chalamet's Paul Atreides, Zendaya's Chani, Florence Pugh's Princess Irulan, and Anya Taylor-Joy's Aaliyah Atreides, will all be reprising their roles. That's all we've got for you today, but let us know in the comments below your thoughts on Dune Part 2 and what you like the most about this recently released adaptation of Frank Herbert's famous novel. Also, share your opinions on what you think Dune 3 will look like and how it's going to wrap up the story. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. In the meantime, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.